So friends, question, how many of us struggle with forgiveness at the high holidays? Real talk here. How many of us struggle? Yeah, some hands? Yeah? How about like especially with certain people? Yeah, me too, right? Another question. I see a hand in the back there, yeah. So how many high holiday sermons do you think you've heard about forgiveness over the years? So I remember as a young adult myself sitting in synagogue, I used to roll my eyes at the rabbi's sermons on forgiveness. Ugh, again? Does that ring true for anyone else here today? It's okay, it's all right. Like I said, real talk here today, right? So when I became a new rabbi, I vowed I would not write such sermons. I vowed not to be that rabbi. But yeah, then I did. And I'm about to do it again now. Why? Why, Rabbi? Why so many sermons on forgiveness? I started thinking about this, and I think it's for two reasons. I'm going to go meta here for a moment. First of all, I think it's important to say that forgiveness plays a critical role in how teshuvah works in Jewish tradition and in Jewish law. According to Maimonides, the 12th century philosopher whose legal code on teshuvah is still considered the definitive word on the subject, we can only get the atonement that we are promised on Yom Kippur, the lifting of the burden of guilt for harms that we've committed, only once we have appeased those people we have harmed and they have forgiven us. I'll say it another way. If we have harmed someone else and we are able to make right with the other person, then atonement can come for us and the burden of guilt is lifted. If we don't make right with those people, and if they do not forgive us, then atonement does not come, can't come, and we will continue to carry the burden of that guilt. Now, I just want to ask a quick question. Can everyone hear me in the back? Okay. I don't know, Marian, if we can just up it a little bit, like a smidge. Kind of losing my voice a little bit. All right. So what this means is that when we do not forgive, we are potentially standing in the way of freeing someone else's soul from guilt. We don't want to be that guy, right? So in essence, in Jewish tradition, forgiveness is the currency of repentance and of atonement. It is the very grease that makes those wheels turn. Without that golden ticket of forgiveness in our hands, we can't get through the door of atonement. Not any of us. So it matters. It does matter. Now, the second reason why I think we rabbis focus so much on forgiveness at the high holidays is a reason that I just heard recently from a brand new book on teshuvah that just came out last month. And I have it right here. And it's an instant classic on the subject. I highly recommend it. And the author of this book, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, she makes a very convincing argument that we Jews focus so much on forgiveness because the dominant Protestant American culture around us puts a major emphasis on it, giving preference to and almost to the exclusion of every other part of repentance and amends. Now that made sense to me, being the avid observer of culture that I am, because when you read Jewish literature on teshuvah, yeah, forgiveness is there, but it's not really everywhere in the way our focus on it might imply. It's time for the high holidays again. Immediately, my mind goes to, who do I need to forgive this year? But there is so much more to teshuvah, really. And this is one of the points that Rabbi Rettenberg makes in her book that I think is worth sharing with you today. She invites us to put the forgiveness questions aside for just a moment in order to dig in and focus on the rest of the repentance and repair process of teshuvah first. Because if we are doing that work well, people will organically and naturally forgive us. If other people do good repair work with us, we will organically and naturally forgive them too. And Rabbi Rettenberg says that the problem actually lies in the reality, the fact that for the most part, we do not do good repair work with other people. We don't emphasize it, we don't teach it, we do not talk about it anywhere near enough, and a lot of us also don't do it. Instead, we find ourselves potentially throwing out our apologies like we might give candy to children, especially at this time of year. But friends, are we really remorseful when we give those apologies? Are we? Seriously, I know I've done it. I've apologized for the sake of making peace, because it was what was expected of me in the moment, but not necessarily always because I really meant it. And you may identify with this too. So perfect example of this, there's this statement that you probably have heard people saying at this time of the year. I've already heard it said this year myself, and it goes like this. If I have caused you any harm this year, I ask that you forgive me. Or the version that you might see posted on Facebook, if I have caused anyone any harm this year, I ask for forgiveness. Who's seen that? Who's seen it before, right? You've heard it, you've seen it, maybe you've even said it. Yep, okay. So what's missing there, and hopefully you're starting to see it with me, is that when we make such a statement, that we aren't actually saying there what we should be forgiven for. We're missing a really important step in the teshuvah process. In fact, we may not even know what we are asking a particular person to forgive us for, because we're saying, if I've caused you any harm, and it also says if, so it's not even certain, right? And if that's the case, how could a blanket request for forgiveness possibly be considered as a real amends to someone else if we don't even know what we're asking them to forgive us for? So I don't think it can. I mean, it's nice, looks nice on social media, gets lots of likes every year, but it is, I think, generally missing the point of what we're actually supposed to be doing with apologies and asking for forgiveness. Far too often, we rush to ask others for forgiveness before we ourselves have really done the teshuvah work, which is to explore exactly what we did, to explore why it was harmful to someone else, and most importantly, how could we change our behavior so that we don't do it again? That work would actually prevent us from causing harm in the future. And we shortchange that amends work all the time, and yet we ask for forgiveness anyway. And I'm not, saying I'm anything special in this. I do it too. And Rabbi Rettenberg calls it cheap forgiveness, because we haven't earned it. We haven't earned it. And so I ask you, is it any wonder that we struggle so much with forgiveness on our high holidays, especially with certain people, right? Because often enough, that other person or that institution has not actually done the work to merit our forgiveness yet. Quite possibly, if we're hurt, we're still hurting. And there may even be a high likelihood that the person will continue to repeat that behavior over again, especially if they haven't actually addressed their own behavior. And really, how can you forgive someone when they are still consistently causing the same harm? And they're not done. And yet, We try to squeeze ourselves into this narrow little hole every year. We have to forgive. We have to forgive. We have to forgive. Right? I've been that rabbi. So, I want to also add some nuance to this, that it's true that there are good reasons to forgive. Research says, for example, that people who forgive score higher in all sorts of measurements of wellness and happiness. And that's real. That's real. We do feel better when the burdens of resentment, of negativity can be lifted. And I myself have given that sermon, we need to forgive anyway. I've given that sermon twice. But Rabbi Rettenberg makes the point that it's exponentially harder for us to get there when the person who we're trying to forgive hasn't actually amended their behavior, or even shown any remorse, or even confessed that they know what harms they caused. And that's the hard part, right? That's the hard part. In some cases, such as when we might be talking about ongoing abuse, how does one forgive in the middle of that? How does one forgive in the middle of that? Rabbi Rettenberg says in those cases, when forgiveness is demanded from a victim or survivor of abuse, especially when there is a power differential involved, one has more power than the other, then those demands of forgiveness are usually more just about forcing victims into silence and inaction, rather than actually seeing any harm be repaired. And here's one example that Rabbi Rettenberg mentioned that moved me in particular, that I hadn't really thought about, but I think it's true. She documents a number of specific cases where there were unarmed Black men and boys who were shot dead by police in this country, and then the media goes up to the parents or the spouses of those who were killed, or in some cases even children, and ask them to declare publicly if they forgive the person who shot their loved one. We've probably all seen those moments on TV, on social media, and we might even see it as normal. I certainly didn't question it. But Rabbi Rettenberg asks us to pause there and to ask, to really put ourselves in the place of that person who's being asked in that moment, what if this happened to me? How could I forgive someone for shooting my loved one? Especially if the shooting just happened. Especially if it's determined that my loved one was unarmed, did nothing to merit such aggression, or especially if the person who committed this isn't expressing any remorse for what they did. If instead they are actually defending themselves in court, saying that they had a right to take that shot or shots. How do you forgive that? Really? And question Rabbi Rettenberg asks, why does our media press these people for these forgiveness statements? Why do they do that? Because we as a culture are really obsessed with forgiveness, and sometimes we prioritize it over harm and repair of harm. And we see this a lot with public cases of sexual assault as well, same dynamic, right? Again, because we're dealing with power differentials as well. So these are some of the issues that we have with forgiveness in our country. And for me, I think it really helped explain a lot in terms of why I personally struggle so much with forgiveness. Every year, there's like certain people I need to forgive, and I'm like, really? It's a lot, right? And of course, there's more to say that I haven't covered here. There's a lot in this book. But we're also here this morning for some uplift and some hope. So is there a solution to this quandary? And what could the solution be? Fortunately, Rabbi Rettenberg has that answer as well. That perhaps we can put the forgiveness piece aside for just a moment and focus instead on making sure that we are doing our own repair work first. That we are doing our own repair work first. How do we bring about the reparative justice in our relationships that naturally, organically leads to forgiveness and peace? How does that happen? I was thinking about this as I was reading. And one simple way that any of us could start is simple. If we are asking another person for forgiveness, we find ourselves in that position. We might think about making sure first that we can also state the harm that we think we caused. Something like, I am very sorry that I interrupted you when you were speaking. That has to be really frustrating when you were trying to talk and I'm talking over you. And I wonder if it must feel as if I'm saying that your thoughts didn't matter to me or that I don't want to hear them. And I am very sorry that I caused that impact on you. Another simple fix could be, instead of making these blanket requests for forgiveness that we see at this time of year, perhaps we could try and engage someone specifically of what we might need to seek forgiveness for. Especially if someone seems bothered, walking around with a little cloud over their head and we don't know why, we might ask, hey, what's going on? What's going on for you? I'm here to listen. Maybe it's about us, maybe it's not about us. Maybe it's about something else. But then we're also showing someone that we care about them. And if it is about us, then we get to listen. We get to take it in and see if it feels like it has merit. And if we hear something like that, we could also ask them, how do we repair the harm that we've caused? You can let them tell you, people have ideas about these things. Gosh, yes, you interrupt me quite a lot. Maybe don't do it. We may not always like the answers that we get when we do this. But doing that repentance and repair work is the key to true freedom and harmony in our relationships. And ultimately, also of being absolved of the burden of guilt that we seek. That's what we seek at this time of year. And if there is repair to be done, we can at least try to do it, right? We can at least try. Again, another caution, some more nuance. It is careful. Rabbi Rettenberg is very careful to caution that there are some important exceptions to all of this. For example, in the case of abuse, abusers can use demands to repair, to manipulate and oppress another person. People can take advantage of that situation. They can say, well, you did this to me and you did that to me and you need to, make these amends, especially when there is a power differential involved. And if you're in a position like this and you're concerned or unsure if that might be the case, it's a good idea to talk to someone else confidentially about it and see if they agree that it feels like a reasonable thing that one might make amends for. But the main key thing for any of us, really, is just to start thinking about it, right? Like even just to get the wheels turning a little bit. I know that reading this book has made me much more aware of how I apologize for things, even this week, but also to ask, how can I contribute more to the solution, even when others have harmed me? For example, can I take the risk of sharing how I felt hurt by something? Can I take that risk rather than just holding those resentments and stewing over it in silence? Anyone out there ever done that? Yeah, anyone? Anyone? Maybe? Yes? Okay, I'm seeing some heads nodding. Yeah, me too. So there's a role that each of us can play, and what can any of us do to help prevent harms from happening again? So my blessing for us, friends, is we can dig in and think about this some more. Really thinking about it is a fine first step. To try to work with others, to talk about divisions in our relationships, in our communities, our society, to share also, and to listen. To share and to listen. To find the ways to achieve true organic harmony out there. It will take time and effort, but as we like to say in our preschool, we can do hard things. And it's true. This is our year, friends, to work on healing. And I love the fact that there are real specific tools that are available to us right now to do it. I hope, it is my hope, that we'll actually be able to study this book together. It is really wonderful. And I hope we're able to read it here together at Adat Re'im. It focuses on a lot of different areas in our society where teshuvah work has not been done. And it invites reflection on how we might do that teshuvah work. I think it's highly recommended. And the reality that every one of us can each play our part to make this year a really great year, 5783. We can all pitch in and we can all do something in that regard to help smooth things out with the folks around us. May it be so. Gamar Chatima Tova, Shana Tova. Shana Tova. Yeah. So that was my forgiveness sermon. I did it again. All right, friends. It is time now for Yizkor.